Hello, my name is Phoebe, and I walked into the hospital unannounced, only to find my grandfather alone, unconscious, surrounded by machines, not a single familiar face in sight. While he fought for air, my family. They were clinking champagne glasses on a five-star cruise, posting selfies with hashtags like #FamilyFirst, without a word to me. They erased my name from medical records, froze me out of every decision. But it didn't start there. This was just the final insult in a pattern years in the making. So tell me, how does a family forget the one person who never forgot them? I sat there holding his hand, dry, cold, too still, and tried to make sense of the silence surrounding him. A single monitor beeped slowly behind me, the sound spacing itself out like it didn't care if anyone was paying attention. I wanted to say something, to fill the void with noise that mattered, but I couldn't. My throat was locked up. My jaw clenched shut. I hadn't planned to come back to Sacramento. It wasn't something I circled on a calendar. One day, something inside me just said, "Go." Not a voice, not a gut feeling, just the absence of anything holding me back. So I packed a small overnight bag, booked a last-minute ticket, and didn't tell a soul. I didn't need to. The air outside the airport had felt thinner than I remembered, cold, crisp, and distant. Sacramento winters aren't dramatic, but that afternoon carried a chill that burrowed into your ribs. The rideshare driver was polite enough, didn't say much, which I appreciated. I wasn't in the mood for forced small talk about the holidays or how nice it must be to go home. Home wasn't where I was headed. I was going to the hospital. The city looked the same and nothing like it at all. I passed the gas station where I got my first scratch-off ticket at 18. It was now a CBD wellness center. The street leading toward the old neighborhood had the same potholes I remembered, just more of them. A bakery I used to love was gone, replaced by a luxury dog grooming studio. The hospital hadn't changed. County General still wore its age like an old coat, patched up but holding. The front desk staff looked tired but polite. I gave the name, Lyle Ramsey, and she nodded as if she'd heard it too many times lately. "He's in Bay 6, she said. "You family?" I hesitated for half a second. "I'm his granddaughter." "Glad someone showed up," she murmured, barely loud enough for me to hear. But I did. And I wouldn't forget it. The ER bay curtain was half drawn. The light overhead flickered just once before holding steady. There he was, my grandfather. The man who once lifted me onto his shoulders just to let me pick oranges off the backyard tree. Now, motionless. Tubes in his nose, hands limp, skin grayer than I was prepared for. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I just sat. It felt like my whole body disconnected from itself, like I was watching someone else live this moment. I reached for his hand and held it. Cold, not freezing, but far from warm. That's when it hit me. No one else was there. Not a single soul. No Vera, no Avery, no Seraphine. He was alone. I pulled my phone from my jacket, instinct more than intention. A notification blinked across the screen. Seraphine Harlan is live. I stared at it for a second before tapping. The screen lit up. There they were. My family. On a yacht. Champagne flutes raised, sunglasses on, sea breeze in their hair. Seraphine angled the camera toward the spread of food. "Nothing like lobster on Christmas Eve," she giggled, panning to Vera, who laughed like she'd forgotten how to feel shame. Then Vera raised her glass. To freedom, to peace, and to letting go of dead weight. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I just stared. My breath didn't hitch. My eyes didn't blur. The rage sat low, like coals waiting for air. No mention of Grandpa. No toast to Papa. No acknowledgement that he wasn't there, that he was in an ER with a plastic bracelet and a failing heart. I locked my phone and set it face down on the small rolling table beside the bed. I turned to him. "Don't worry," I whispered. "You're not alone anymore." He didn't stir, not even a flinch. But for the first time since I arrived, I felt something inside me shift. Not a breakdown, not yet, but a breaking open, a quiet cracking of a dam that had held too long. Time passed, I don't know how much. The overhead light buzzed, The monitor beeped, and no one came. No nurse checked in. No distant relative burst through the curtain in guilt or panic. Just me. Just him. And I wondered how long he'd been here like this. How many hours or days he'd laid in silence while they sailed blue waters, smiling for cameras and sipping away their conscience. I adjusted his blanket, even though he couldn't feel it. Sat back in the chair, rubbed my temples. And for the first time since I walked into that hospital, I said it out loud. Not to him, not even really to myself. They left you. I didn't need to say who. We both knew. The hum of the ER monitor filled the space like a second heartbeat, steady, indifferent. I kept my hand in Grandpa's for another minute before gently laying it back on the bed. It felt wrong to move, like I'd interrupt something sacred, but I needed answers. I needed to know why no one else was here. Why I had to find out like this. Why he was alone. I stepped out of Bay 6, pulling the curtain behind me with a quiet swish. The nurse from earlier was still at the desk, now flipping through a folder with the kind of focus you reserve for trying not to fall behind on an exhausting shift. "Excuse me," I said, approaching slowly. "Could I check who's listed as Grandpa's emergency contact?" She looked up, hesitating. "You're Phoebe?" I nodded. Her fingers tapped at the keyboard, and then she frowned. "I'm sorry. You're not listed here." "What do you mean?" My voice cracked a little. She rotated the screen slightly in my direction. There it was in black and white. Emergency contact, Avery Harlan. Legal health proxy, Seraphine Harlan. Underneath that, a highlighted note. Do not disclose medical information to Phoebe Eldridge, considered emotionally unstable. Signed by POA. Emotionally unstable. I didn't realize I'd stepped back from the desk until I bumped into the wall behind me. Who wrote that? I asked, but it came out softer than I meant, like the question was scared of its own answer. The nurse didn't meet my eyes. "It's signed by the power of attorney. I'm really sorry." Of course it was. Vera. Or Seraphine. Probably both. The family duo that wielded appearances like weapons and used concern as camouflage for control. I gave a small nod and walked away before she could say anything else, before she could apologize for something that wasn't her fault, and certainly wasn't mine. I walked past the vending machines, past the hallway lined with old plaques and donor names, and pushed open the glass doors into the crisp December night. The air hit harder now, sharper. I pulled my coat tighter around me and stepped to the side of the building where it was quiet. I unlocked my phone, found Vera's contact, and hit call. It rang once, and then, of course, she picked up. "Phoebe?" Her voice was light, like champagne foam. In the background, I could hear music, probably some yacht party mix with just enough percussion to feel expensive. Glass clinked. Someone laughed. "He's in the hospital, Vera," I said, skipping the greeting. "He's in the ER, alone." She paused just long enough to let me know she didn't care. Then, "He didn't want to come with us. You know how he gets. So dramatic over nothing." He collapsed. "We didn't know it was that serious," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Anyway, he's fine, right?" "No, he's not fine." "And you had me removed from the file?" Her tone dropped, just a notch. "Phoebe, don't do this." "Do what?" "Don't ruin this for the rest of us. We haven't had a proper vacation in years. This was supposed to be healing time. You're always so intense about things." I almost laughed. Instead, I looked up at the hospital's gray brick facade and said, "You can keep the vacation. I'll handle reality." The call cut, not dropped, ended. I stood there for a minute, breathing like it was a job. Then I walked back inside. The cafeteria was mostly empty, the coffee burnt and the pastries looking like they'd seen better days. I grabbed a seat in the corner booth and opened my notes app. "Grandpa, Bay 6, alone, no family. Emergency contact Avery, legal POA, Seraphine, blocked from access, label, emotionally unstable. Call with Vera, denied everything. No one's coming." I stopped typing. There was a smudge on the toe of my boot, faded brown leather, scuffed from years of walking too far on too little sleep. I stared at it. It was like I'd never existed in this family, like I was a ghost with a cell phone and a savings account, useful but invisible. The phone buzzed in my hand. Instagram notification. Avery Harlan posted a new photo. I tapped it. There they were, all of them, on the deck of a white, gleaming cruise ship. Laughter, sun, champagne flutes again. Seraphine posed in a silk cover-up like she was born on yachts. Vera in a wide-brimmed hat holding a mimosa. Avery standing behind them, captioned, "Blessed to be surrounded by love." Family first. I stared at the screen until it blurred. Not because I was crying. I wasn't. I was past that. And I closed the app, locked the phone, and sat back in my seat. They could erase me from the paperwork, but I remembered everything they wanted to forget. I stayed in that cafeteria booth longer than I should have. Not because I was waiting for someone to come find me, I knew no one would, but because moving meant confronting the weight of everything I'd just read, seen, and heard, and I wasn't quite ready to carry it all yet. Eventually, I stood. The walk back to the ER wasn't far, but each step felt heavier, like grief had quietly attached itself to my ankles. At the front desk, the nurse looked up again, her expression softening. "We just finished organizing Mr. Ramsey's belongings," she said. "Would you like to take them?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She handed me a paper bag, neatly folded at the top, the kind you'd get at a corner store. I clutched it tighter than necessary as I walked back toward the family waiting area, found a quiet corner, and lowered myself into the stiff plastic chair. Inside the bag were the little things no one ever thinks they'll have to sort through. A worn leather wallet that barely stayed shut. Grandpa's eyeglasses, slightly smudged, arms bent from years of use. A blue handkerchief folded with care. And then, at the bottom, a crumpled piece of paper, folded 3 times. It wasn't labeled, but the moment I touched it, I knew it mattered. I smoothed it out on my lap. The handwriting was unmistakable, clean, sharp but uneven near the edges. He'd written it himself. "If Phoebe comes, don't stop her. She needs to see it for herself." My breath caught. I read it again, and then again. He'd expected me, not just hoped. He'd known, not maybe, not possibly. He had written it down, with intention, like someone planting a flag in the ground and daring anyone to remove it. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't some random twist of fate that I happened to be the one at his bedside while the rest of them played pretend on a yacht. He knew what they were capable of. He'd seen the denial creeping in and had made his choice, quietly, in ink. He trusted me. The world didn't tilt or shake or do anything dramatic, but my chest expanded just slightly. For the first time in days, I inhaled fully. I slipped the note into the inside pocket of my coat and stood. Leaving the hospital felt different this time. The air was colder, or maybe I was just more aware of how little I was insulated from it. I took a long, quiet walk to my rental car, then drove the 15 minutes back to the apartment I'd rented for the week. A short-term place tucked between an overgrown hedge and a cracked driveway. Once inside, I kicked off my shoes, shed the coat, and sat at the edge of the bed. My body was moving, but my mind was still back in that hospital chair. I decided to take a shower. Maybe the hot water would pull me out of this fog, or at least peel off the smell of antiseptic that had attached itself to my skin. I didn't bring much with me, just travel essentials, a pair of jeans, and a sweater that smelled like the drawer it had lived in too long. After drying off and wrapping my hair into a loose bun, I opened the apartment's tiny mailbox on a whim. Inside was a single envelope. No return address. Postmarked 2 weeks ago. I tore it open slowly, suddenly aware of how quiet the room had gotten. It was his handwriting again. "Phoebe, I know I don't say it much. Maybe I never have. But I see you. I see how much you carry. If they leave me behind, I know you won't. Don't let them tell you who you are. You already know. Love, Grandpa." I didn't cry right away. The kind of grief I felt wasn't sharp. It was thick, heavy. like molasses stuck in my chest. I sank down onto the steps outside the unit and let the paper rest on my knees. I read it again and again. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun had started to dip low, casting a long orange streak across the pavement. At some point, I stood. I needed air, real air. I walked to the end of the block, then turned left toward the coffee shop I'd passed when I first arrived. It was closed. The hours painted on the glass told me they'd shut an hour ago. That didn't matter. I wasn't there for caffeine. I leaned against the cold brick wall and looked up at the sky, and my mind wandered. It took me back to a Tuesday morning, maybe a year ago. Grandpa and I had met for coffee at the diner near his place. He insisted on paying, even though I made more than enough to cover both our orders. "Old habits," he'd said with a wink. That day, in between bites of sourdough toast, he looked at me and said, "Everyone talks, all the time. Noise, noise, noise. But you listen. That's rarer than gold now." I'd laughed it off then, said something like, "Guess I'm just quiet." But now, those words curled around me like warmth in the cold. He'd noticed me. In a family where I was always the one overlooked, always the one expected to be agreeable, accommodating, available, he'd seen through the silence and into the substance. I tilted my head back and closed my eyes. "They erased me, Grandpa," I whispered. "But you left a trail." And I would follow it. Every step. I didn't sleep much that night. After I got back from the walk, I curled up on the edge of the bed, laptop balanced across my thighs, staring at the banking portal I hadn't logged into in months. It had always been easier to just send the money when someone asked. I never questioned it. Utilities, tuition, medication, unexpected costs that kept stacking. Every time they needed something, I wired it without blinking. But now, the blinking cursor in the password box felt like it was daring me. I logged in. It took a minute to load. The Wi-Fi in the apartment wasn't great, but once the screen populated, the numbers came alive. Balance, lower than expected, way lower. I clicked the transaction history. The dates lined up too cleanly. 3 first-class plane tickets, a suite booking with an upscale cruise line. Spa charges under Seraphine's name, at least 6, all labeled rejuvenation package. A shopping spree at a luxury retailer. Then, the final insult, a $6,000 transfer titled Reroute MedFund, Emergency Reallocation. I leaned back in my chair. They used his prescription money. Money I sent for heart medication, for oxygen refills, for that stupid orthopedic bed Vera swore he needed. I stared at the screen and whispered, they used his pills to fund their pedicures. The words sat in the air like smoke. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared. Until something else hit me. The old email backup Grandpa had me set up years ago when he got locked out of his account one too many times. He hated technology, but insisted on keeping everything just in case. I'd helped him create a duplicate Gmail account that forwarded copies of all his incoming messages. He didn't even know it was still active. I logged in. There weren't many messages, mostly newsletters and spam. But one email caught my eye. The subject line read, Assisted Living Transition, Jan Plan. It was a draft. The sender was Avery. I opened it. There were bullet points. My brother had bullet pointed my grandfather's exile. Keep him calm. Don't loop Phoebe in, she's too attached. Legal clearance after cruise. Transition discussion mid-January, depending on health decline. I sat frozen. I didn't even realize my fingers had gone cold. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a lapse in communication or bad timing. This was a plan. An organized, deliberate, strategic plan to remove our grandfather from their lives, and me from the narrative. I dropped the mouse and stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the glass of water beside me. I braced myself against the edge of the desk, breathing in deep, slow gulps of air. They weren't just selfish, they were calculated. This wasn't incompetence. This was a coup. It was already dark out. A thick fog had crept in while I was absorbed in the screen, wrapping the windows in a blur of condensation. I grabbed my coat, stuffed the folded email printout into the pocket along with Grandpa's note, and headed for the hospital again. The streets were quiet. The drive was short. My fingers tapped the steering wheel at every red light. My mind spinning but clear. Back at County General, the late shift had taken over. A different nurse was on duty. She smiled, recognized me, and buzzed me through with no questions asked. The hallway toward the ER was dimmer now. Fewer people, more space to think. I stepped back into Bay 6. He was still there. Eyes closed, breathing shallow but steady. A blanket tucked around him. Someone had turned off the overhead light, leaving just the glow from the monitor and the small wall sconce above his head. I pulled the chair close, sat, and leaned in. "Hey, Grandpa. It's me again." I didn't expect a response, but I kept talking. "They have a plan. They want to put you in a home. And they don't want me to know, because I'd stop them. Because I care enough to be inconvenient." His fingers twitched. Just once. Barely there. But I saw it. I sat forward, held his hand, and felt it. Just the faintest pressure. It could have been muscle memory. Reflex. Or maybe not. "I see you, I still see you, even if they don't." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was full. I pulled out my laptop, opened a new folder, labeled it Evidence Folder, Ramsey Estate. And then I started uploading everything: the screenshots, the emails, the banking records, the recorded voicemail from Vera last month asking for another bump to help cover heating. The list of prescriptions I'd paid for. I organized it by category: medical, financial, legal, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a ghost walking through their lives. I felt like a witness. A storm was coming. I could feel it, and I wasn't scared. By the time I shut the laptop and slid it back into my bag, the night had already folded itself over Sacramento like a heavy wool blanket. Outside, fog clung to the streetlights, turning their glow into pale halos. I didn't feel tired. Not really. More like sharpened, alert, as if I'd finally come out of some kind of emotional anesthesia. I took the long way back to the apartment, looping past the old corner pharmacy where Grandpa used to pick up his prescriptions. The place was closed now, window signage faded and peeling. It used to be where he'd stand at the counter and chat with the pharmacist like they were lifelong friends, even if he only remembered their names half the time. He'd loved routines, familiarity, people who knew him by name. I wasn't going to let them strip that away. Once I got back to the apartment, I made tea I didn't drink and sat with the silence until the steam faded. Then I opened my phone's contact list and scrolled until I found it. Richmond Creel, Grandpa's lawyer. I hadn't spoken to him in years, not since a family wedding where he'd given me a long, quiet nod and said, "You'll be the one holding the truth when they start rewriting it." I hit call. He answered on the third ring. "Phoebe Eldridge?" His voice was gravel, but steady. "Yes, sir." I'm calling about Lyle." "I know why you're calling," he said after a pause. "If you're the one reaching out, then things are worse than he feared." I didn't need to fill in the blanks. Instead, I told him what I'd found: the bank records, the fake transition plan, the note Grandpa had written about me. "I have scans of all of it," I added. "Would you like me to send them over?" "Yes," he said. "And meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. Don't bring anyone. Don't tell anyone." The line went quiet. I sat with it for a few seconds after he hung up, letting the weight of those last 4 words settle. Don't tell anyone, not even my siblings, especially not them. I forwarded the files, then set my alarm for 7:30. But I didn't sleep. The next evening, just as I was finishing a basic dinner, toast and eggs, I got the notification. Zoom invite, Harlan family check-in. I stared at it. There was no message attached, just a meeting link and a subject line that felt more like a trap than a courtesy. My gut told me not to click it, but something sharper inside me said otherwise. If they were gathering, they wanted something. If they wanted something, they were nervous. And nervous people make mistakes. I clicked. The screen loaded with Vera first, perfectly lit from a golden lamp that wasn't hospital grade. She was in a robe I recognized from a catalog she used to leave open on the kitchen counter like bait. "Phoebe," she said brightly, as if this was a holiday reunion and not a staged ambush. Avery joined next, seated in what looked like a yacht lounge, drink in hand. His smile was thin, lips tight as piano wire. Then Seraphine appeared, background blurred, makeup perfect. "We just wanted to check in," Vera began, clasping her hands. "This has all been a lot." I didn't respond. Seraphine filled the silence. "We've had so many messages. Everyone's asking how Grandpa is, and we realized we needed to come together, for his sake." Avery jumped in. "We had to act fast. He's clearly not capable anymore. You get emotionally caught up. That's not helpful right now." I still said nothing. Vera tilted her head in that way she did when she was about to lie but wanted to look like she wasn't. "No one is cutting you out, sweetie. We all have our roles." I reached up and clicked record without breaking eye contact. Seraphine gave a soft, patronizing chuckle. "You're not handling this rationally. We're thinking about the bigger picture." I took a breath. "I am now. That's the problem, isn't it?" The screen went quiet for half a second, just enough for me to feel it land. Then Vera tried to pivot. "Look, this doesn't have to turn ugly. Let's just agree on boundaries." "Great," I said. "Let's start with the truth. Then we can draw all the boundaries you want." I ended the call. Not out of drama. Not because I couldn't handle them, but because I finally knew I didn't need to hear one more lie that started with, "We're just concerned." I uploaded the recording to the same folder where the rest of my evidence lived. The folder was growing. I opened my messages, found Avery's name, typed slowly. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm preparing for court." I hit send. No threats, no anger, just fact. 30 seconds later, my phone lit up. Vera calling, ignored, then Seraphine, ignored. Avery, declined. One after the other, like fire alarms in a burning house they swore wasn't on fire. I placed the phone face down, stood, and walked to the window. Outside, it was raining softly now, the kind of rain that doesn't shout, just settles. I watched the drops streak the glass and thought of Grandpa, still hooked up to tubes, still waiting for someone to treat him like more than an inconvenience. They wanted me quiet. They'll wish I stayed that way. I didn't wait for the next morning. At 11:04 p.m., sitting at the tiny kitchen table in my rental apartment, I logged back into the family's shared financial account. The same account I'd been silently funding for years. My name was there, second under authorized users, just as it always had been. Quiet, functional, ignored. I clicked into the account settings. Freeze all transfers. The button glowed in soft blue. I hovered over it for a moment. My hand didn't shake. My breath didn't hitch. I just clicked. A pop-up. "Are you sure you want to freeze all activity? This will disable all associated cards and outgoing transfers." "Yes." I clicked again, and just like that, it was done. The status bar turned red. Account status, locked. I leaned back in the chair and finally, took a deep breath. Not the kind you take after crying, but the kind you take when you know you've done something irreversible and necessary. Within 30 minutes, my phone started lighting up like a cheap casino slot machine. 7 missed calls. 3 voicemails. And then, the first text. From Seraphine. "We're stranded. What did you do?" I let it sit for a second. Then I typed back, "Nothing you wouldn't have done if it were you in my place." I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't expect one. Instead, I stood, walked over to the window, and opened it slightly. The air outside was sharp, but it smelled like clean things, wet leaves, cold concrete, something honest. I closed my eyes and let it sit on my skin. When the phone rang again, I answered. It was Avery. "What the hell, Phoebe?" he snapped before I could say hello. "You'll have to be more specific," I said calmly. "I just got a call from the hotel. Our cards are all being declined." Seraphine tried to pay for breakfast this morning and got flagged like she was laundering money. Maybe she is, I said. In the background, I heard Vera's voice rise. Give me the phone. There was a shuffle. Then her voice, icy and sharp, came through. You think this makes you look noble? She hissed. You think this proves something? You look unhinged. Because I stopped letting you spend my money? You've always been unstable, Phoebe. You overreact. You twist things. This has never been about your grandfather. This is about your need for attention. No, I said flatly. This is about him dying alone while you were drinking champagne and pretending you still had a soul. She didn't reply, so I ended the call mid-silence, and I didn't feel guilty, not even a flicker. I sat down again and pulled out my laptop. Richmond had already responded to my earlier email, confirming our meeting was still set for the next day. I uploaded the Zoom recording into our shared case folder. Then I dragged over the call logs, the financial screenshots, and every bit of evidence I'd gathered since I'd arrived in Sacramento. After that, I opened a blank document and began typing. Victim Impact Statement, Phoebe Eldridge. Line by line, I laid it all out, not just what happened, but what it meant. How they'd manipulated, minimized, erased. How they treated our grandfather like a burden instead of a man. How they'd erased me from the legal records, the conversations, the entire image of what family meant in our house. How I was told I was too sensitive when I noticed he wasn't invited, too dramatic when I asked where the medication funds had gone, too emotional when I stayed while everyone else left. But the final paragraph was what mattered. I wrote, I wasn't the unstable one. I was the inconvenient truth they couldn't spin into silence. I saved the file, closed the laptop, rested my hands on the table and just sat there. The apartment around me buzzed softly, an old fridge, a distant heater pipe. But inside me, it was quiet, not empty, not numb, just steady, ready. They'd built a fortress of denial, and for years, I'd stayed outside it, thinking it made me a better daughter, a better sister, a better person. But fortresses crumble from the inside when you bring the truth through the front door. I stood, brushed crumbs from my sweatshirt, and turned off the lights. Let them stew in the silence. Morning was coming, and I was walking in with everything they thought I'd never find the strength to use. After freezing the account and sending the final batch of documents to Richmond, I expected a counterattack. I didn't expect it to come quite so fast or so publicly. The morning air was sharp when I pulled into the hospital parking lot. The fog had mostly lifted, leaving behind a pale blue sky stretched over Sacramento like tissue paper. I had an appointment to meet with the legal liaison at County General, one of Richmond's referrals. Apparently, the hospital had quietly been reviewing recent decisions made under Grandpa's power of attorney, and something wasn't sitting right. I checked in at the reception desk, gave my name, and was escorted to a small administrative office down a corridor that smelled faintly of printer toner and forgotten coffee cups. The liaison, a woman named Shelby, closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit. We've been combing through your grandfather's admission file, she began, folding her hands atop a manila folder. There's something you should see. She pulled up a video on her desktop monitor. The timestamp matched the day Grandpa was brought in. It showed the hospital lobby, grainy but clear enough to recognize everyone. There was Vera, dressed in what looked like a designer jacket, holding a clipboard. She turned to Grandpa, who was seated in a wheelchair. Just sign here, Daddy, she said, placing a pen in his hand. It's for the insurance. He hesitated, looked around. Vera leaned in, lowered her voice. Come on, it's just a form. After a few more moments, he signed. The screen froze. Shelby clicked pause and looked at me. That was the updated power of attorney form, financial and medical. I felt my chest constrict, not with surprise, but confirmation. She handed me a copy of the footage on a flash drive. I labeled it in my mind before I even left the building. Consent under coercion. As I drove back to the apartment, my phone pinged with a push notification. I tapped it. A headline from a local news aggregator. Cruise video sparks outrage. Family under fire for heartless remarks about hospitalized veteran. My breath caught. I opened the video. It was Seraphine's face, in perfect focus, holding a champagne glass. She was smiling, too wide. In the background, I could hear Vera's voice clearly. "He's so far gone, we might as well bury the memory before the body." My hands went cold. I checked the timestamp. The clip had been posted to a private story 3 days ago. Someone must have screen recorded it. The hashtags underneath were brutal. Hashtag forgotten, grandpa, our blood money. Vacation, /cruelty, isn't luxury. The video had already been shared across Facebook and Reddit. Commenters were piling in. How do people like this sleep at night? She should be disinherited. This poor man deserves dignity. This daughter deserves handcuffs. It was spreading faster than any press release could catch. Richmond texted me 2 minutes later. "Don't say a word. Let them hang themselves in daylight. The court will see it all." I replied with a simple, "Understood." Later that afternoon, I met Richmond at the courthouse. He'd filed for emergency conservatorship using everything we had, the financial statements, the emails, the video of Grandpa signing under pressure, and now, the viral cruise clip. The hearing was quick, but not rushed. The judge was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s with a voice like polished steel. After reviewing the evidence, she looked at me. "Miss Eldridge," she said, "you seem to be the only one treating this man like a person instead of a transaction." I nodded once. My throat was tight. She signed the order. Temporary conservatorship granted, effective immediately. All previous power of attorney designations are suspended pending investigation. I stepped out of the courtroom into a cold breeze and blinking sun. And there she was. Vera, standing just off the courthouse steps, surrounded by 2 reporters and a camera crew. Her makeup was perfect. Her eyes were not. "She's manipulating everything," she shouted, pointing in my direction as I walked down the steps. "She's unstable! This is a setup!" The reporters turned toward me. I didn't stop walking. I didn't glance in her direction. I walked right past them, past the cameras, past the fury in Vera's voice, and didn't say a word, because I didn't need to. They'd tried to write me out. I brought the pen to court. Richmond's voice on the other end of the phone was calm, but there was an edge to it, the kind that only surfaced when something significant had been found. "We located it," he said. It was tucked inside a personal effects envelope, notarized and sealed, dated exactly 8 weeks ago. I didn't speak. He continued, "Your grandfather amended his directive. You, Phoebe Eldridge, were to be given full control, medical and financial, should he become incapacitated." I closed my eyes and sat down slowly at the foot of the bed. The silence in the room was deafening, the kind that didn't ask questions or offer comfort. I held the phone tighter. "He gave me the last word," I whispered. The next few hours moved with the kind of weight that didn't allow for small distractions. Richmond emailed me a copy of the document, scanned in high resolution, with his note at the bottom. "Print this. Bring it to the memorial." I didn't need the reminder. That afternoon, I drove to the Veterans Garden, the same place Grandpa used to walk through on Sundays. There was a quiet clearing, a small open-air chapel with wooden beams and folding chairs. I had arranged the service quietly, personally. No online invitations, no catered trays, no sermon. Just a gathering of those who had actually shown up when it mattered. 6 chairs were filled. That's all. The nurse who held his hand during the second night. The neighbor who used to bring over soup. His barber, who hadn't cut his hair in months but still called to check in. 2 of his old army friends, and me. I wore black, but not the performative kind. Simple, clean, respectful. The air smelled like pine and damp soil. Wind moved gently through the trees, like it knew not to interrupt. At 2:17 p.m. they arrived. Vera, Avery, Seraphine. Uninvited, dressed to match each other, like a brochure for image management. Vera wore sunglasses too large for the cloud-covered sky. Avery had on a gray wool coat like he was posing for a courtroom sketch. Seraphine trailed behind, phone in hand, like she was scouting Instagram angles. They approached the path toward the chairs. The security guard, a local veteran himself, stepped forward. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "This is a private event. You're not on the list. Vera's face froze. We're his family. The guard didn't flinch. Not according to the estate, Avery scoffed. This is ridiculous. Seraphine blinked like she'd just realized no one was filming her. We deserve to be here. I stepped forward then, slowly, holding the folder in my hand. You had your chance to be there when it counted, I said quietly. You chose somewhere else. They didn't move. They didn't leave. So I turned my back on them and walked up to the front. There was no podium, just a small mic stand and a wooden stool. I set the folder on the stool, adjusted the mic, and looked out at the people who had actually earned the right to grieve. This isn't about blood, I began. It's about presence. I pulled out a small remote and clicked once. Behind me, on a portable screen, the video began. First, Vera on the cruise deck, raising her glass. He's so far gone, we might as well bury the memory before the body. The room went still. Then Avery's voice on the Zoom recording. She's too emotional. She doesn't think straight. We'll handle it without her. And finally, the footage from the hospital lobby. Vera placing the pen in Grandpa's hand. It's for the insurance. He hesitated. Signed. The screen faded to black. Nobody said a word. One of the nurses wiped her cheek quietly. The barber sat forward in his chair. The wind shifted slightly. I stepped back to the mic. You left him behind, I said. So I did what he couldn't. I left you too. A beat, then one clap, then another, then silence again. But it wasn't empty. It was full, whole. The service ended quietly. The 6 guests took their time leaving. I stayed until the very end, folding the chairs myself, collecting the notes people had left beside the plaque engraved with his name. As I walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. Vera. I stared at the screen, deleted the call without opening it. Justice had been public. Healing, I knew, would be private. The morning after the memorial, I returned to the Veterans Garden alone. It was still early, the kind of quiet that only exists before people begin filling the world with noise. Dew clung to the grass, and a low breeze moved lazily through the oaks. The wooden chairs were gone now, folded and stored away, but the memory of the service still hung in the air. I sat on the bench near the dedication plaque, the one I'd chosen with Richmond's help. It read, "You were loved, even when forgotten." I took Grandpa's jacket from my bag and laid it gently over the chair beside mine. It was a simple act, but it felt like sealing something, not closing a door, more like opening a new one. One of Grandpa's old army buddies had stayed behind after the others left yesterday. He was the kind of man who didn't speak unless it mattered. But before he got into his truck, he looked me in the eye and said, "Not everyone gets someone like you, Phoebe." I hadn't known how to respond then, so I nodded, the way Grandpa used to. Quiet acknowledgement, the kind that didn't need a performance. By midday, I was back at the apartment. My shoes were muddy from the grass. I peeled them off at the door and walked barefoot across the wood floor, listening to the soft creak with each step. On the kitchen table sat a stack of unopened mail. I hadn't checked it since the hearing. It had mostly been bills, fundraising postcards, and one local magazine that still thought I lived in Seattle. But one envelope stood out, cream-colored, no return address. My name written in elegant script I knew too well. Vera. I opened it slowly, bracing myself for a litany of passive-aggressive barbs or a backhanded plea for understanding. But there were just 5 words, written in her flawless handwriting. I was wrong. I lost you. No greeting, no explanation, no apology, just one final grasp at control, making it about what she lost, not what she did. I stood there in the kitchen, the letter trembling slightly in my hand. Not from emotion, just from finally letting go. I didn't rip it up. I didn't respond. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled out Grandpa's journal, the one I'd kept locked away since that first night at the hospital, and tucked the letter inside. Then I closed the book and returned it to the drawer. Later that afternoon, I logged into the donation portal for the foundation, the Lyle Ramsey Dignity Fund. It had only been live for a week, but we'd already helped 3 patients, One man needed a ride home after discharge and had no family to call. Another received reading glasses and warm clothes. The third, her name was Denise, wrote a handwritten letter I read 3 times. Thanks to your fund, I got to say goodbye. He didn't die alone. That matters. I pressed my palm flat against the desk and breathed in slowly. I hadn't cried in days. I still didn't. But something inside me shifted again, softer this time. Not pain, just release. I stood and walked to the fridge, grabbing the little sticky notepad from the side. It was something Grandpa used to do, leave reminders that weren't always about groceries. Sometimes it was a quote, sometimes a phrase. Once it was just the word, patience. On the top sheet I wrote, love loudly, protect quietly, walk away when it's time. I peeled it from the pad and pressed it to the fridge door. Then I turned, glanced at the coat rack by the door. Grandpa's jacket still hung there, same as I'd left it, the sleeves slightly creased, the faint scent of cedar and aftershave lingering just enough to make me stop. Some endings don't need a closing speech, just presence. Some truths don't need to be shouted, they just need to be shown. Phoebe didn't burn bridges. She built her own path, one piece of truth at a time. And maybe that's the lesson here. Real strength isn't loud, it's steady. It's choosing dignity when you could choose revenge. What would you have done in her place? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More true family stories, quiet, powerful, and unforgettable, are coming your way.